something that's beyond the pale. We are going to continue with the over 60 nations that are pounding ISIL and going to go after them. In the meantime, obviously, our thoughts and prayers are with those who've been lost and hoping for a speedy recovery for those who've been injured.
Understand. What would you say your experience has been like here for 72 hours, given the goals that you had?
Well, for 50 years, we had no contact with this country, and it was not serving our ultimate goal, which is freedom and opportunity for the Cuban people. And we initiated a new policy of engagement, not out of naivete. We understand that the government here continues to control all aspects of life, that individual freedoms continue to be curtailed, but our belief is that if you've got more Americans traveling, if you've got more commerce, if you've got more interaction, if our ideas and our culture is penetrating this society, that over time that gives us more leverage to advocate for the values that we care about. And obviously the Cuban American community is such a central part of the American experience. We consulted a lot with Cuban Americans before we initiated this change. There's a debate within the community as to whether this is appropriate or not, because there's still a lot of anger and frustration about the history of what the Cuban exiles experienced. But my view has been that if you do something for 50 years and it doesn't work, you got to try something else. And we're going to continue, as we saw yesterday at the press conference and in my speech today, to amplify our concerns about human rights, about people who are being arbitrarily detained or harassed just for speaking their minds or expressing their political views. But this now gives us more leverage and a greater platform to advocate for the things we do.
Would you say then there's momentum for what you're doing based on what you've experienced here?
The good news is what we're seeing is that there's overall support in the United States for this change in policy, but perhaps more importantly, the majority of Cubans, a strong majority of Cubans support it. Now, I met with some dissidents before I came here, those who supported this change in policy, a few who thought that it somehow rewarded or validated the existing government. But what I explained to them is that we will continue to speak out loudly on the things that we care about. That's not going to change. But isolation had, in some ways, empowered those who didn't want to see change, because essentially they were in a position to blame all the problems that they had here on the United States, and we could not do what I did today, which is speak to the entire Cuban population and talk about the values that America cares about and the extraordinary success that Cuban Americans have had when they have freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the ability to start their own businesses and so forth.
Mr. President, I'm a first-generation Cuban American raised in Puerto Rico.
Absolutely.
I spent the last 72 hours with my family that has never left Cuba.
Right.
They're here.
Yeah.
They have their children. They're contemporary with my age, 46.
Right.
What do you tell them and their children about having hope for the future?
You know, I think our goal is that if, as a consequence of the changes in policy, you start seeing small businesses emerge, and you're starting to see people being able to drive their own car or open up their own barbershop and get their own income. If we start seeing more American tourists